"Please don't be sad, ma'am. My pa can help broken people," whispered the child, then pointed toward a cabin. The wind carried the scent of pine and wood smoke down the lonely valley, the kind of wind that whistled through the mountains like a ghost humming an old hymn. Evening was coming quick, pressing long shadows against the tree line, and with it came the cold that cut through a person's bones if they weren't careful. Clara James pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and trudged along the dirt trail. Her boots, worn thin from too many miles, scuffed against the stones. She had walked most of the day, not quite knowing where she was going, only knowing she had to keep moving. Her heart ached with a weight that made every step feel heavier than the last. She had left behind a life in tatters, a marriage gone sour, a home that no longer felt like home, and neighbors' whispers that cut sharper than knives. She didn't carry much, a small bundle of clothes, a tin cup, and a Bible wrapped in cloth. That was all she had left of her mother, and even the good book had begun to feel like it belonged to another world. Clara stopped by a fallen log to catch her breath. Her throat burned, and her eyes stung, though she tried not to let the tears fall. She had wept enough these past months to drown herself in sorrow, yet somehow the ache inside refused to ease. That was when she heard it, soft footsteps, lighter than a bird hopping through dry leaves. Clara turned her head. A little girl stood a few feet away, clutching a rag doll against her chest. She couldn't have been more than 6, with a mess of dark curls framing her round face and eyes so big and earnest they seemed to catch all the light left in the valley. She looked at Clara as though she'd been expecting her, as though this meeting wasn't chance at all. "You're cryin'," the child said matter-of-factly, tilting her head. Clara startled, wiping quickly at her face. "No, sweetheart. I'm just tired." The girl frowned, not believing her. "When Mama was tired, she didn't look like that. You look like you got a hurt inside." Clara blinked, caught between surprise and embarrassment. Before she could find an answer, the child stepped closer, her little boots crunching on the dirt. She held the doll out almost like an offering, then whispered, "Please don't be sad, ma'am. My pa can help broken people." The words landed like a stone in Clara's chest, simple and soft, yet heavier than any sermon she'd ever heard. "Oh, honey!" Clara's voice broke despite her best effort. She lowered herself to the log so she could be eye level with the child. "That's a mighty kind thing to say. But your pa, I don't think he can fix the kind of broken I am." The girl shook her head stubbornly, curls bouncing. "He can. He fixes everything. He fixed our roof when it leaked and my dolly when she got a tear. He fixed his own heart too, when Mama went to heaven. He said God gave him hands for workin' and a voice for prayin', and that's enough to help folks." Clara's breath caught. She had no words. The child reached for her hand, small fingers curling around her own calloused ones, and tugged gently. "Come on," she urged. "Cabin's this way. Paul know what to do." Clara hesitated. She should have been cautious. This was a stranger's child leading her deeper into the woods toward God knows who. But there was something in that little face, a trust so complete it disarmed her fears. And truth be told, she was too tired to argue with hope, even the fragile kind. So she let the girl lead her. The trail wound through tall pines, the ground soft with needles. The air grew cooler, and Clara pulled her shawl tighter. Every so often, she glanced at the girl, who hummed to herself as though guiding lost women through the woods was the most natural thing in the world. "Child," Clara asked softly after a while, "what's your name?" "Anna," the girl chirped. "What's yours?" "Clara." Anna smiled wide, as if tasting the name like candy. "That's a pretty name. Paul like it." Clara didn't answer. She was listening now, and there it was, faint at first, then stronger, the smell of wood smoke, warm and comforting. A moment later, through the trees, she saw the glow of firelight flickering against rough-hewn walls. A cabin stood nestled in a small clearing, built sturdy from logs, smoke curling lazily from the stone chimney. Chickens pecked in a little pen to the side, and a split-rail fence encircled a patch of ground where a mule stood tethered. Anna tugged her forward eagerly. "There it is. Home." Clara stopped at the edge of the clearing, her breath catching. For all her wandering, for all the places she had seen and passed by, this cabin looked more like belonging than anything she had known in years. The door opened. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, his beard thick but neatly kept, his hair touched with early gray though he couldn't have been much past 35. His eyes, sharp as flint and yet softened by weariness, landed on the child first, then on Clara standing behind her. He froze, hand resting on the doorframe. "Anna," he said slowly, his voice deep, carrying the weight of a man not used to many words. "Who's this you've brought home?" Anna beamed. "This is Clara. She's sad. You can help her, can't you, Pa?" The man's gaze shifted back to Clara, steady and searching, as though reading pages she hadn't meant to open. Clara's throat tightened. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. Your daughter she found me on the trail. For a long moment, silence stretched. Then the man stepped aside, pushing the door open wider. Trail's no place for a woman alone at night. Come in, ma'am. There's stew on the stove and a fire to warm you. We'll sort the rest later. Clara hesitated, then crossed the clearing, Anna skipping at her side. She stepped into the cabin, and the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket she hadn't known she needed. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A stone hearth glowed with fire, its light dancing across shelves lined with jars of preserves and neatly stacked firewood. A sturdy wooden table sat in the center, 2 chairs pulled close, a third tucked against the wall as if waiting for someone long gone. The man ladled stew from an iron pot into bowls. Anna chattered cheerfully, placing spoons with mismatched handles onto the table. Clara sat stiffly, still unsure of her place, but the smell of meat and herbs made her stomach growl despite herself. They ate mostly in silence, save for Anna's happy hums between bites. Clara tried to thank the man, but words failed her. When she finally dared to look up, she caught his gaze again. It wasn't unkind, just measured, like a man weighing not only what she said, but also what she didn't. After the meal, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Name's Matthew Hale. Folks round these parts just call me Hale. Clara James, she replied softly. Well, Miss James, you're welcome to stay the night. Cabin's small, but the loft'll do. Tomorrow, if you've a place you're headin', I'll see you on your way. Clara lowered her eyes to the table. She had no place she was heading. No one waiting. No home that felt like hers anymore. Anna, oblivious to the heaviness in the air, crawled into Clara's lap with her doll, snuggling close as though she had known her all her life. See, Pa. Told you. She just needed us. Matthew's eyes lingered on the sight, the broken woman holding his little girl like a second mother. Something in his chest stirred, old and quiet, the kind of ache a man learns to live with until one day he remembers it doesn't have to stay. Outside, the night settled over the mountains, crickets beginning their chorus. Inside the cabin, for the first time in many months, Clara felt a flicker of something she thought she had lost forever. Not joy. Not yet. But the faintest glimmer of safety. And for one night, that was enough. Morning came slow, the way it does in the mountains, gray light spilling gently through the cracks of the shutters, the smell of coffee and wood smoke stirring a sleeper before sound ever did. Clara opened her eyes in the loft, blinking at the beams above her. For a moment she had forgotten where she was, her mind still wandering the empty roads she had walked. Then she heard the clatter of pans below and Anna's cheerful giggle. It all came back. The cabin. The kindness of strangers. The man with solemn eyes. Clara sat up on the narrow cot. The quilt that covered her was patched but warm, and her bundle of belongings sat neatly at the foot, untouched. She exhaled slowly. Some part of her had expected to wake and find it all a dream. She climbed down the ladder. Matthew Hale was already at the hearth, stirring a skillet of eggs and salt pork. Anna sat on a stool, swinging her legs, humming to her doll. Morning, Matthew said without looking up. Clara smoothed her shawl nervously. Morning. I didn't mean to sleep so late. You didn't, he replied. Breakfast is just about ready. Anna hopped down and ran to Clara, tugging her hand. Pa makes the best eggs. Sit by me. Clara smiled faintly and let the child guide her to the table. The food was simple, but after weeks of half meals and cold scraps, it tasted like a feast. Anna chattered through every bite, about her doll, about the mule named Jasper, about the squirrel she saw outside the window. Matthew hardly spoke, but every now and then Clara caught him watching her with that same steady gaze, quiet and unreadable. When the plates were cleared, Clara stood. I should be on my way. I've already taken too much from your table. Matthew wiped his hands on a rag. You've taken nothing that wasn't offered. Where exactly are you bound? Clara hesitated. The truth sat heavy on her tongue. Nowhere, she whispered. Not any more. Anna frowned. Then stay here. We got room. Don't we, Pa? Matthew's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara, then at his daughter, then back again. That's for Miss James to decide. But the offer stands. You're welcome here as long as you need. Clara's throat burned. She wanted to refuse, to spare them the burden of her sorrow, but Anna's hopeful eyes were too much. At last she nodded faintly. Maybe, just for a little while. The days that followed unfolded slow and gentle, like pages turning in a book Clara hadn't realized she wanted to read. She helped with chores, mending clothes, fetching water, tending the garden beside Anna. She swept the cabin floor and washed dishes while Matthew worked outside chopping wood or fixing the chicken coop. At first she moved carefully, as though afraid of doing something wrong, but soon the rhythm of life in the cabin steadied her. Anna clung to her side as though she'd always been there. She asked Clara to braid her hair, to tell her stories, to sit with her while she drew crooked flowers in the dirt with a stick. Each small request chipped away at the walls Clara had built around her heart. One evening, as they shelled peas by the fire, Anna looked up and asked innocently, "Miss Clara, are you going to be my new mama?" The question hit Clara like a jolt. She froze, hands still in the bowl. Matthew, sitting nearby with his Bible open, looked up sharply. "Anna," he said gently but firm, "don't put Miss Clara in a place she hasn't asked for." The girl's cheeks flushed. "I was just a skinned." Clara's voice trembled as she managed, "Your mama must have been a very fine woman." Matthew's eyes softened, but his answer was quiet. "She was." Nothing more was said, but the silence that followed was not an empty one. It was full of the unspoken, grief shared across the table, different losses yet kin to each other. It wasn't always easy. Clara's nights were still haunted by memories, of her husband's anger, of the cruel gossip in town, of the loneliness that had driven her onto the road. Some mornings she woke with her heart so heavy she could barely rise. But each time, there was Anna's small hand tugging at her sleeve, pulling her toward the day. Matthew, too, carried his own burdens. He didn't speak of them often, but in the quiet moments, Clara saw it, the way his eyes lingered on the third chair at the table, the way his hand brushed the wedding band he no longer wore. He was a man who had built walls of silence, not out of unkindness, but out of survival. And yet, in small ways, those walls began to crack. One afternoon, Clara joined him outside to split kindling. She picked up an axe, but he shook his head. "Your hands aren't made for this work." She lifted her chin. "My hands are made for whatever work needs doing." He studied her, then nodded once. "All right. Let me show you." They worked side by side until the sun dipped low. When her arms ached too much to go on, she laughed breathlessly, surprised at herself. Matthew smiled, just a ghost of one, but enough to change his whole face. It was the first time she had seen him smile. Trouble came, as it always does. Word of a strange woman staying at the Hale cabin spread to the nearby town. Some folks were curious, others suspicious. Clara heard whispers when she went with Matthew to trade for supplies. "That's the James woman, isn't it? Heard her husband left her. Best keep your distance. Trouble follows some folk." The words stung. Old wounds reopened. That night Clara sat on the porch alone, fighting the urge to pack her bundle and leave. Matthew found her there, staring at the stars. He leaned against the post, arms folded. "You thinkin' of runnin' again?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't belong here. People are already talkin'. I won't ruin your name, Mr. Hale." He let the silence stretch, then said, "My name's already been through fire. What folks say don't change who I am, or who you are. Anna needs you. And," he paused, clearing his throat, "I reckon I do too." Clara looked at him, startled. The honesty in his voice left no room for doubt. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt wanted. Weeks passed, turning into months. The cabin grew warmer, not just with firelight but with laughter. Clara sang while she cooked. Anna's drawings now had 3 figures instead of 2. Matthew's silence grew shorter, broken by quiet words of gratitude, by small smiles, by the steady presence of a man learning to open his heart again. One crisp autumn evening, as leaves blazed gold across the valley, Matthew stood with Clara on the porch while Anna chased chickens in the yard. "You came here broken," he said softly. "But you've mended more than you know. You gave Anna her laughter back. You gave me back something I thought was gone." Clara's breath caught. "And you gave me a home when I had none. You gave me hope." Matthew turned toward her, the setting sun painting his face in amber light. Then maybe it's time we stop speakin' of broken things. Maybe it's time to start speakin' of new beginnings. Clara's heart thudded. She nodded slowly, tears shining in her eyes. Behind them, Anna's laughter rang clear through the air, a sound as bright as church bells on a Sunday morning. For the first time in a long, long while, Clara believed she wasn't just passing through life anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to.